All right. Welcome to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum's Zoom series, Trolleyology. My name is Kristen Fredrickson. I'm the Assistant Manager of Visitor Experience here at the museum. Thank you so much for joining us today for this really special Trolleyology. And welcome back to all the familiar names and faces that I see tonight. This virtual series features programs on Pennsylvania transit history topics, stories of the trolley era, and our collection that you can experience from your home. And we're going to continue these regularly. So if you have a show that you'd like to share that fits the museum mission, please let me know. That'd be anything about Pennsylvania, the trolley era, or cities where our streetcars come from. And if you have a program that doesn't quite fit those guidelines, also reach out anyway. And we'll have a full list of upcoming programs at our website, patrolley.org, which I will put in the chat in just a few minutes. And a very, very special thank you to those of you who donated during the registration process for tonight's program. We really, really, really appreciate your support, especially of these virtual outreach programs. And I know pretty much all of you at this point know all about PTM, but for those who might be new, we were established in 1954 by the Pittsburgh Electric Railway Club as the Arden Electric Railway. It was a group of trolley enthusiasts, like all of us here tonight. The museum opened to visitors a few years later in 1963, is actually located along the former route between Pittsburgh and Washington by trolley. And you'll find about 50 trolleys and electric railway cars here at the museum, about 20 of which operate, and about 30,000 visitors per year take the 4-mile scenic ride at the museum. A couple updates. We do have the West Penn Trolley Meet coming up this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. On Sunday, you can join us at the Port Authority's South Hills Village Rail Center for a special behind-the-scenes tour. All the information is at our website at patrolley.org. I hope you guys can join us. We've got people coming from as far away as Nebraska, Maine. So please join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you still want to be a vendor or an exhibitor, let us know. You can find my email address in your registration confirmation from tonight. Let's see. Also, June is going to be a very exciting month here at the museum. So we should see some big progress on our new Welcome and Education Center starting this month. It's going to be very exciting. We'll have some updated photos for you. Follow us on social media to keep up with all of that. And visit our website, patrolley.org/support, to donate to the museum's capital campaign. All right. So now we're going to go over, it's going to be a little bit different tonight. This Trolleyology is going to have discussion, panel-like discussion throughout the program. So feel free to type questions into the chat box. I will pose those, at appropriate times, but we will also have our open Q&A at the end as usual. And just to note, this program is being recorded and will eventually be up on our YouTube channel once we can get it edited. And we'll keep our microphones muted throughout the show. So you'll notice you are muted. Except for our presenters here. So we'll keep that until the end. And yeah, we'll have the Q&A at the end. George, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. And really welcome everybody to the presentation of Making of a Book. We're going to give you a behind the scenes look at what it took to actually create this book. Sort of a long timeline and a lot of effort. And I may point out volunteer effort. I'll put in a shameless pitch. I won't give anything away, but I can tell you that it's great to be part of this organization. So, and I really encourage you to think about maybe joining us. So with that, let's talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the book.
Oh, obviously. George, we're not seeing your screen yet.
Oh, you are not. I apologize. All right, my bad. So share my screen.
Did you remake him a co-host?
Yes. There we
go. All right. There we go.
All right. So, making of a book, what I just talked about. So, so aside from, we'll show you the book, at least a couple sneak peeks at it if you don't have the book already. As Kristen said, we will be having a panel discussion among the group of us here. And we do want to tell you about some of the process that we went through. And I think that was all part of getting to the final product, whether questions, objectives, some of the challenges we faced, and some of the decisions that we made as a group. Some of those tough choices, nice problem to have, was we had a lot of great photos. We also looked at some other examples for inspiration and design and ideas. We'll also show you what some of the early prototypes look like, because if you've ever built things, whether in the physical world or in the digital world, a proof of concept is always part of the process. But we still had to get it done. And there was a whole story there as well. And finally, we had to map it out, and we'll talk about what it took to actually draw the digital map that was printed and in your back sleeve of the book. And then we'll wrap it all up, and as Kristen said, open up the floor to discussion and Q&A. The book is definitely a group effort. You don't do something this extensive by yourself. And you certainly can't do it by yourself and have it turn out the way it turned out. So again, that's why it's a panel discussion tonight, and it's a group of people talking about everything that they put into it over the many years. Again, photographs, layouts, lots of fun, lots of interesting content. So let's start the panel discussion, and Kristen, introduce yourself and introduce everybody else.
Well, we have 5 folks here today talking about the book. First, we have Dennis Kramer. Dennis has been involved in publications at PTM since the late 1990s. He's worked on calendars, 3 books, and innumerable operator training and tour guide resources. And he's prepared and presented both virtual and public presentations on West Penn Railways. He's done some of our Trolleyology programs before, and he'll be presenting at the West Penn Trolley Meet. And he's also served as Chief Instructor of Operations and has been a teacher for almost 50 years. Dennis, wave. All right. We also have Chris Walker. He's been involved with the museum for 22 years. He served as the project manager for Streetcar City beginning in 2018. He's worked professionally in various roles in the transit industry for 12 years, from bus driver to management to his current role as a systems engineer for planning and scheduling software. He still lives in his hometown of McDonald, Pennsylvania. Chris, wave. And then Ed Lybarger, he's been a PTM member since 1969, and he served numerous years as a board member and officer. He was the museum's archivist for 25 years, from 1993 through retirement at the end of 2018. Ed moved to Eastern Pennsylvania in 2020, but he remains active on the publications committee, and he wants y'all to know that the 32nd Western Pennsylvania Trolley Calendar is in process. And next we have Bruce Wells. Bruce has been at PTM since 1965. He's the longtime pre-press preparer for the annual Western Pennsylvania Trolley Calendar. He's worked with Ed on the museum guidebook in 1993 up to the 4th edition in 2006. He produced camera-ready copy and maps for Dennis's Armstrong County book. And more recently, 2017-18, he worked with Dennis and Ed again on the Allegheny Valley trolley books. And he did a lot of the map work for this book, which you guys will see later, which he started in 2009. And then lastly, we have George Zrust, who designed and laid out Streetcar City, co-editing, co-writing content. As a kid in Carrick, he started writing streetcars to Saturday art classes at the Carnegie Museum. He's worked in Chicago and California advertising agencies for over 22 years on many major brands. And with a background in art and writing, he loves books, writing, music, and all things visual. George, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Kristen, for the introduction of a distinguished set of luminaries, if you will. So,
and you know, I think one thing that we all really want to know at the start here is, where did this book come from? And you know, the idea has been around for a really long time, right?
Great question.
It has been. Back in 1967, the museum president, I guess, was Tom Parkinson. And he's a Briton. He's from England, and he wrote a 3-part series for the Light Railway Transport League. It appeared in their Modern Tramway publication. Well, the museum received permission from them to republish the pages in a single volume, and it was a thin little thing. And the photographs were a little dark and all that, but it sold well. It was reprinted and it sold well again. And along about 1990, in the mid 90s, I guess it was, Larry Lovejoy came to me and he said, let's redo this. I'll work on it, you work on it. And we did. He wrote a bunch, and I wrote a bunch, adding depth, and we wanted to get more of the history in and some of the foam out. The project stalled as Port Authority pursued additions and upgrades, and we would revisit the text after each new ribbon cutting. But now it appears that the system is mature, although I hear him in the paper today talking about light rail to the North Hills. But I think it's mature, and the publication is certainly timely.
Thank you. Ed, and so let's talk as a group here about some of the challenges that we faced in making this. And I think some of what you talked about, Ed, was just the starting point, because that was the manuscript.
That's right. That's
Right.
the easy part.
Yeah, that's the easy part. But who is our audience, and what do we want them to know?
I think a lot of what we were looking at was we had a project that we kept interrupting.
Mhm.
We either interrupted it with the Armstrong County book, we interrupted it with the Allegheny Valley book, which took a lot longer than we probably originally anticipated, but we got a product we had to do, and we're all busy people. It's not like this, we do this for a living. We actually do have a life. And then we have to decide, we've experimented with different things. Who do we want this book to be for? How do we put it all back together so that it looks like it's written by one person or a small committee instead of a group of who have very distinct tastes? What could we afford to do? How long? How short? You're gonna put it, 3-4 volumes? We could easily do that. What kind of a budget did we have? I know basically everything that we've ever done was we put together what we thought we had as for a good project, and we went to process reproductions to say, okay, what's it gonna cost? And the point of what are we going to do with the amount of time we have. And I know for Chris and I and George, and I'm sure Kristen, you've experienced some of this. You walk into the archives of the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum and you open a file drawer and you're just immersed.
There goes 3 hours.
In
Yeah.
materials. And you spend so much time just sometimes by yourself or interacting with another person. And that's one of the great things about this team is we can say things to each other. Sometimes, I've written something and Ed or Bruce will say, I think this is better. And it's nothing personal. There's never been a personal bone about, well, gee, you're stupid or something like that. It's everyone's worked together, and it's been absolutely marvelous. And I think we've worked on the challenges.
Yeah,
And as George has, we have a lot of great photos.
and therein lies a whole story by itself, and a challenge. And let's talk about how many photos we had. So we had photos, we had artifacts like tickets, schedules, coupons, you name it, and more photos. So I think Chris and Ed, and of course Dennis, talk about these photographers and some of the things that we had to deal with. Nice problem to have, though. However, I do want to say that very nice problem.
It is a nice problem. Obviously, we don't have time here to talk about every photo contributor to this book. but I do want to single out 6 in particular that that have really provided quality images to us. These folks came to town beginning in the 1950s because Pittsburgh had one of the United States' last major trolley systems, one which kept streetcars years after most cities went to bus. So we want to thank these photographers both for their work and for the opportunity for PTM to house their collections, to preserve them for the future. So we'll look briefly at the 6 in the next slides. And each of the images, by the way, shown by the photographer appears in the book.
How about it? Let's start with the great Ed Miller.
We'll lead off with Edward S. Miller, Pittston, Pennsylvania. Those of you familiar with his work know that he knew how to use the camera to maximum benefit. The streetcar is always there, but it's never a 3/4 front view. You understand where the streetcar is running. Ed took about 12,000 black and white negatives, and I don't know how many color slides because the numbering system changed very abruptly, but it's probably 6,000 or 7,000. And I made contact with Ed probably 15 years before he passed, and always made the case for the collection belonging at PTM. And like to think as a result of my effort and some other folks' efforts that the collection was bequeathed to us upon his demise
Just
at
a
age
real
90.
A real quick question for you. Do you by any chance know what kind of camera he was shooting on? Because 35s were not as common back then. So is he shooting a Leica or something
He had a
else?
Leica M3.
Classic rangefinder. Not surprised, given the quality.
Yeah.
Jim Schumann.
Jim Schumann was an old-time rail fan from Lancaster County. He worked for the railroad, so it was easy for him to get around to places like Pittsburgh. And he was over here during the 50s and 60s a lot. Unhappily, he brought with him a thing called Ektachrome, which in 1956 wasn't such a great product because it turned red. We've had to color correct some of his, and where that's not been possible, they appear as black and white. And he also took many slides in black and white negatives, and the material came to us after his death from the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania in Strasburg. They felt that we were the proper repository for it. The late John Bromley from Toronto was a big enthusiast about Pittsburgh trolleys, and he made many trips here in the 1960s and 70s. Up until his passing a couple of years ago, he allowed us to use any of his images for any museum-related purpose. He arranged for us to have some of his originals as well. And he arranged for us to receive a large collection of Joe Jessel's and Bob McMahon slides. Joe's picture of the courthouse tower is our cover.
We'll come back to that choice too.
Yeah. And of course, my buddy Fred Schneider is a native of Penn Hills, a prolific photographer of trolleys and light rails and railroads and European cities and American cities. His black and white negatives already reside at PTM, and we regularly use his color images for calendars and projects like this book. Fred is about a half hour away. He and I have lunch every Thursday. We have to give him credit also for helping to acquire the Miller and Schumann collection. He played a big part in both of those.
And I think, as we were talking about earlier, my particular bias towards his images is told in this particular photo, as he showed people. And I think that just this story of a family with their picnic baskets and ready to get on the streetcar really humanizes it. So there are many of Fred's that have some really nice shots like this, including another one that's in the book. Russ.
Russ Jackson is our friend from Collingswood, New Jersey. He's an engineer by profession and was responsible largely for Philadelphia's K cars. Russ came to Pittsburgh in the mid-50s and went around town taking pictures of the transit system. If you've been buying our calendars for any extended period of time, you might remember that one of his trips we used as a twofer. We showed the accident and then we showed the backup after the accident. At any rate, Russ did get out and cover West End better than anyone I've ever seen. And his North Side coverage was equal to Ed Miller's. So we thank Russ.
Exactly. And this is a great shot. And again, if you live in Pittsburgh, you can go over to Chestnut Street. You can actually see the street looking still pretty much the same, even with the car tracks and the red brick.
And a final shout out here to Barker Gameri. Barker was a regular in all the fan trips that were run in the 70s, but he'd been here a lot during the 60s, and he covered virtually the entire system that remained around 1964, 65, 66, 67. He bequeathed his collection to us. We learned about this one day when Scott Becker got a telephone call on a Friday saying that the moving van would be arriving Monday.
Who's going to be there to unload?
I was.
Moving van.
Scott was.
Oh, was he? So put on some gloves.
Yeah.
So with that, and again, those are only 6 of the photographers. And I will say, too, that the team here, and I will say that everybody really worked hard at giving credit to anybody whose work appeared in the book. And I think that's also one way that we tried to honor the work of all the people who came before, but the people who contribute. And I think that also was really imperative that we did that. But
when I came on board, that's one of the very first things I found out with working with Ed and Bruce was that whatever you can credit, you credit. And I agree with you completely. It's incredibly important. And we always do it. We always do it. And I think a lot of that goes to Ed.
Yeah.
Well, it's the right thing to do, period.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I agree. It's just, yeah, there's a line in the sand, and I think doing the right thing. But I think too, I'll do my little pitch here. I think that's one reason why PTM is a special organization, because people think about things like that. But
why don't we move on to find out what did we leave behind, George?
Well, what did we leave behind? Well, I don't know. So, Chris, why did we have to leave some things behind? Why?
Well, and unfortunately, a lot of good things too. And as George and I started to work on the design and layout of the publication itself, we realized one of the biggest factors kind of working against us was going to be space. We talked a little bit earlier about target audience, and we knew early on we wanted to have a target audience for the book itself, a broad audience. And the book couldn't be beyond a certain size because we didn't want a price point that was too high that would take it out of that target market. For example, the gift market, buying the book as a gift for someone. So I think my first original draft with the manuscript and the photos and the layout ideas we were sort of looking at came in at around 300 pages. So we knew that was going to be a little bit on the high side for what we were trying to do. So unfortunately, we had to make some tough decisions, and I know we've selected a few of them here. And they're all great images, but didn't quite make the final product.
Yeah.
This photo, I should point out, wasn't a trolley company photo. This was the truck manufacturer's photo. They were trying to sell the truck and show how it reached the wire. What better way to do that than put it over top of a double-deck streetcar?
And also not hold up the line either. And I think that this was the era too, that the idea of motorized support vehicles were really coming to the fore on streetcar systems. So, but yeah, we just didn't quite have a place for it. I have to say these are two of my favorites because I love the people pictures, and that's something. And actually, just as a backstory to the backstory, when we started looking at the people pictures and the operations photos and human beings behind the scenes, we said we have to feature them. But we couldn't get them all in. I personally like the route foreman in the riding boots. I'm not sure what he did to sort of keep the cars running on time with those boots, but let's say he was successful. And again, the route foreman's truck with a radio in it. How cool. So we were talking about this one earlier. Where is this one at?
Charleroi Car House.
With quite a group of trainmen posing there, right? But it didn't quite have a place as much as it was a cool picture. For those of you who follow photography and Pittsburgh photography, and you saw the one cover I showed earlier of Teenie Harris, who worked for many years for the Pittsburgh Courier, we have this in our collection, and it was kind of tempting to include in the operations part because it's certainly, if you look behind the car on the left, you'll see just the top of the trolley back there, right? Well, this is going to take a while to open that line back up again. But it really just wasn't central enough. We had another one that told the story better about the door against the streetcar. Chris, why were we talking about, we wanted to use this one, but why did we not use it?
Well, this one's just a little bit soft in terms of the focus there.
Yeah, and it's
Great image.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like 1945 or something, isn't it?
And half lit and half dark. It just, the sun's too bright on the front of the low floor, but it's really interesting behind it, and the route form and everything. But it's not a high quality enough. It's a wonderful photograph.
This is 1947, and Kodachrome had an ASA rating of 8.
Which made it.
We were having a discussion once at the Port Authority about bus bunching in Oakland, and I showed them this photo to show that it's not a new thing. You should see there's 3 back to back streetcars.
But people were riding them. Actually, I like. See, and again, there's a lot of nice touches in here, and one of them is clothing, both on the men and the women. If only it had been a little sharper. So cool. This one we looked at, and again, I'm a little biased. My father grew up on the north side in Spring Gardens, Spring Hill neighborhood. Spent a lot of time going back there myself with him, and seeing a PCC coming up near the top of the Spring Hill line was really appealing. When we got a little closer to it, you see this one's also pretty soft, unfortunately. But it's not just photographs. And Dennis was talking earlier about some of the artifacts. And Chris, you can tell us, because you're on the operations side, what is this? What are these documents?
Well, these are big index cards that the company traffic department kept. And these are actually records of each route in the system and any routing or service changes that were made to that route. And you can see they're all written by hand in pen. And we have them, we have these going back from 1902 up to about, I think 1942 or so.
1942, they quit maintaining them.
Yeah, they stopped maintaining them during World War II. But in terms of information, they're just like a treasure trove. They right down to detour information. If something major happened, they would put a notation on the back of the card. And Ed had mentioned Fred Schneider earlier as one of our featured photographers. He actually went through a number of years ago and digitized a lot of this information. So we have a digital record of a lot of it now. So, I mean, it's just from a historic standpoint, it's a wonderful resource into a snapshot, to a moment in time.
Yeah, the other thing on these is that this collection includes all of the little routes that were dotted lines on the 1959 map that Bruce will talk about shortly. So if you really thirst for minutia, we have it.
And incredible penmanship of the period done in ink. And it was probably working with a pen like this, dipping into an inkwell. If not, and learning to write with an ink pen is an art. And unfortunately, it's a lost art, but we have it and it's preserved and it's beautiful, other than just the information there, but the way that it's presented is absolutely beautiful. We don't see things like that anymore in our digital world.
We had inkwells in our desks in grade school.
Right.
Well, yeah, and I will say that when Chris pulled these out just to show me a few samples, I think kind of a jaw dropper. It's like, oh my God, and this is only a few of them. We looked at, I think we had some Etna ones, but it's like, oh. But again, it wasn't quite for this book, maybe down the road. But we did talk about inspiration, and we did look at other books, and frankly, it's a picture book. We wanted it to have some appeal. We really wanted it to jump off either a point of sale display, a shelf, somebody looking over someone else's shoulder. So we looked at some. These happen to be a few in my collection. If you know the writings and all the travel writing of Paul Theroux, that book on the left is part of a traveling exhibit. But as soon as I saw that, I said, well, it just summarized everything about Indian railways from the British to the current time. So I think there's a lot of shorthand going on there, but it's a beautiful photograph just by itself. If you're not familiar already with the project, the Pittsburgh Project of Gene Smith from the 50s, he actually was a story by himself. He became obsessed with Pittsburgh to the point that there are thousands and thousands of his negatives that never really quite came to light the way he wanted to. He spent a lot of money. I think he kind of bankrupted the family, but he made a lot of beautiful photographs of Pittsburgh. And this is one of them, this collection. The Carnegie has them, and I'm not sure who else has some of the rest of them. I did mention Teenie Harris, the Pittsburgh Courier photographer. This is a beautiful collection of his work. And what can I say? I look at the cover of this and there's just so many things I like about it. you know. So again, cover sell book. This was a book that spoke to me at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles one time, and very, I think, forward-looking design, very interesting reading as well, if you like books and the book scene. But it's just another example of how you can actually even merge, for instance, on the left, on the cover, region and map with illustration. Chris, let's talk about some of the ideas that we had about the design and the layouts.
Sure. And as George and I had started the process of working on the layout, we knew we wanted to go for a little bit of a modern layout with which does take advantage of white space on the page. And also we wanted to look at large images. And we had a lot of nice photos that we wanted to make sure we could see a lot of detail in. And we made them so that some of them took up a full page and some of them even might take up 2 pages, like a 2-page spread. So those were some of our early design considerations, and using that as a starting point, we started to kind of work our way through, putting the book together in Adobe InDesign, along with importing the manuscript and starting to put our images together. And we also started, I think in the next couple of slides, we'll see some of the other decisions that we started to make as well in terms of just general layout, how things would look on a page and how they work together.
Yeah, and this one kind of fulfilled both, because it's not only a layout with a lot of airspace or negative space, but it was also a book treating the use of color. And there are people who are nerds about color, and there's people who are nerds about typography. I probably have a bit of both of them, but colors actually are a system. And when you see colors that go together well, you know somebody's thought about them. Those particular cards on the left were a promotion from the Alumni Association. I personally really like those business cards on the right. They are mine. Not my own design, but from a past job. But it was really nice. All 4, same front, 4 different back. When we talked about books that sell, we also have to think about where they're going to be displayed. So you might not see the cover of the book every time. You might only see the spine. And if you look at your own bookshelves, I certainly looked at mine. I said, wow, some of them you can read, some of them you can't. I sure would like them to jump off the page. So you can see what we ended up with is a very simple spine on Streetcar City. So all those decisions mushed together, if you will. And I think a lot of what Chris said is we really wanted to feature the photos and let them speak for themselves. We eventually realized that we couldn't have too many colors. And I'll throw this out there for the audience. You can put it in the chat and maybe come back to this. A little quiz for later of why we might have used red. But we also used a combination of fontography. So we used a very clean sans serif, it's called, Futura, for headlines and impact on the cover and the sidebars and the title pages. But for longer amounts of text, a more classic serif type font, but in this case, one of the newer ones, we went with Minion Pro. So thus you have that combination, like a contrast and a complementary. Then it came time to prototyping. If you build things, you know a proof of concept, you got to start with it, either in the physical world or the digital world. Any thoughts on this, Chris, as we went back and forth on ideas?
Well, I think this is an early version here that we started with. And I think as we started to look at this design with the text and the layout, we also realized we wanted to tell some stories within the story that we're telling. And that's how we came up with the concept of not just having the manuscript text on the pages along with the photos, but maybe doing some build outs of what are sometimes known as sidebars, and kind of taking a sidestep from the discussion, in the main text, and talking about some other related information. So here's one of the early examples we came up with, just talking about the city of Pittsburgh, some of the population numbers and how it's important. Population is a big part of the transit story, and we wanted to make sure we talked about that. And this is just one of those examples here.
And again, this particular photo, not so much streetcar, but it's a beautiful photograph. It's a beautiful aerial photo, and if you look at it, not only can you see Penn Station, but you can see all the railroad yards going down to the point.
Well, the reason for all of those streetcars to be there.
Exactly. It's like people had to get to work. They had to get to school. They had to get to church. They had to get to Kennywood or Westview. Early concepts of the cover. What to call it? We wanted to have a short, concise title. And I think what Ed pointed out earlier on that one photograph, you said it was Joe Jessel that we ended up choosing for the cover. This is a nice photograph. It didn't exactly speak to all of Pittsburgh, though. One part of Pittsburgh, but not the whole story. But you can see some tests of fonts and even some colors. We ultimately went with what we got done. So Chris, I think as a PM or project manager and the lead on the whole big effort, can you talk about the manuscript and really what we went through?
A lot of edits, The manuscript itself, actually only about 1/3 of it ended up in the final product. And that's not because there was anything wrong with it. Again, it just goes back to our space considerations and how everything fit with the layout and the overall direction that the book took. So as you can see from these examples and these slides, there was a lot of back and forth about text and things that needed tweaked, and how we want to say this and how we want to write captions and where the caption fits, and just a big piece of the puzzle. And really the whole project just turned into a balancing act.
Exactly. And how did we communicate across thousands of miles?
Yeah, and that's the other thing is most of this project took place remotely during COVID. And you were on the West Coast.
Yep. On a different 3 hours difference from you too. So I'm a list maker, I have to do it to myself to keep me honest. So you can see we made lots of lists. But of course, how do you give context to something so complex and so extensive as a system that had hundreds of cars and hundreds of miles of track and routes? Bruce took that on, so talk about it.
Yes, it was just a project that I decided to take up after I retired around 2009. I was looking at my earlier editions today, and this is really where it started. I took the map that we sell at the museum, or we sold at the museum, and I looked at it, and I had learned to use Adobe Illustrator, and I thought to myself, well, I want to try to draw this map using Illustrator. And the way to do that was to take the original and make it an underlayment in the program and lock it in place, and then draw lines over it and see what I could do. In the process of doing that, I really became proficient with Adobe Illustrator, and I've used it for doing lettering and graphic things for the streetcars that we've restored at the museum.
So what's some of the advantages of that program, Bruce?
Well, the advantages of the program are that you can draw the lines and edit the lines that you draw to get them to precisely match the lines that are on the thing you're copying. That's one of the big things that I could do with it. And so I took the Mac McGrew map, which he created on a glass table in his dining room, I think in his dining room, and he hand drew everything, and then shrunk it down to about 11 by 25 or so, and got it printed up, and we sold it at the museum for $1, I think, for years. I came across this map kind of concurrently with starting the project, and this is the Electric Railroaders Association map that they produced for their members in around 1949, I believe. And I was so impressed with this because it included so much more detail than what Mac was able to fit on the map that he did, where this map has all of the street corners and all the just so many locations that people wonder about. When you follow people on online, they say, "Oh, where did that line go? And where did it turn? And what was the streets?" And this answered a lot of those questions. So I incorporated the ERA map and decided that we should take our map back to 1949 so that it included more solid lines on it of what was there. I produced several maps. You can actually pull them off the original and turn them and move the lettering around to suit different purposes. And of course, this is the lines on the East Ohio Street corridor, including I marked the death stretch there. I used that and several of these other ones in presentations that I did. I did a lot of presentations in the North Hills, where I taught school for 36 years or 30 years in the North Hills. We lived in the North Hills. I was fascinated by the crosstown line, and I really wanted to get it in my mind where it went, and it really wasn't very clear in the map. So I worked on this and pulled it out, produced this, probably using the SO road map that I had from 1958 that actually still had all the streets on it, because if you use a Google map or something like that, things just aren't there anymore. So that was very helpful. This is another example of taking the map and pulling out stuff and creating a map that I could show people in my presentations. And again, in the North Hills, I decided that, well, maybe we ought to have Perry Highway on there to show people the relationship of the highway to where the trolley went, because not everybody's familiar with that. And also the relationship of where the McKnight Road is in relationship to the Harmony line. So I pulled that out, put it all together. This is what the map looks like. I have today's version. I worked on this today and made a correction on it that was pointed out to me. If I was able to share a screen, I would show that to you. This is what I gave to the people, the guys producing the book, the people on this show, and they turned it around and edited it to include the things that are in the book. One of the things that I was always also fascinated with in here was the dotted line that goes off into space at the top of the map that says, this is the Verona and Oakmont line with no further notations. Well, when we did the Allegheny Valley book, I made a case to Ed and to Dennis that we really ought to take that big blank space across the river from Aspinwall and maybe talk about the Oakmont Verona line, which was an Allegheny Valley route car that was operated by Pittsburgh Railway. So I learned a lot about Dennis and Ed provided pictures and things like that, and we really worked hard to try to figure out where the where the line went and what the chronology of it all was, and we had photos that we had a photo that was like, well, where the heck is this? Well, oh, they cut the line back to the other side of the trestle over Plum Run when they built when they started building the boulevard across that valley, the Allegheny River Boulevard, and they slowly cut the line back until it was all the way back to Verona, and that's where it was abandoned from.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a lot of things, and I think it's by way of process, and but yeah, I think this iterative process and the discussions and the cooperation, and I think some of the things that I think we've all been through, and I think were very instructive. So I think I'll put the touch on Dennis here to maybe bring it home and talk about those things again. What really did it take to make a book?
It takes, first of all, an incredible group of people that have the vision to be able to say we can actually get a project done. It's easy to talk about things. It's very easy to be a talker, but this group of people I found have the ability to work together and be able to see a project. I'm a musician. I practice to get things done. I have a passion for that. We all have a passion for this, or we wouldn't be involved. The people watching this evening have a passion, but they may not have been willing to they may not have had the opportunity to learn. I've learned incredible amounts from Bruce and Ed, and being able to work with Chris and George as kind of newcomers to our group. It helped put all of this together. What do we want to sell? What story do we want to tell? Do we want to tell a story about just a streetcar, or do we want to tell a story about a city that really made a difference? Sure, it's a lot of work and it takes time. They were working on this project before I joined in the late 90s, and you have to and sometimes someone has to take the lead. And Chris, we brought Chris involved with it, and Chris really took over, and he brought George in, and that really put it into high gear. And I think that was probably the best decision we could have made. Bruce and I had talked a lot about it because we were kind of the publications department for 12 or 15 years, and bringing new people in and collaborating, having the ability to work together and not be afraid of offending something. I've written far more things for captions that I've seen either Bruce or I'd say, well, no, man, let's say it this way. And it's never a personal thing. It's always being able to work as a team, and I'm always proud of our effort. Yeah, and we proof it, and we we do a run afterwards. We've already come to the agreement with ourselves that when we publish again, we'll fix a few of the little errors that creaked in here and there, but that happens. As Ed has always said, the first book written without errors will be the first book ever written without errors.
Right. and I think you bring it up, and I think that collaboration, and for me, it was rewarding and it was fun. I also want to say, as like one of the new kids on the block, relatively speaking, I think I always felt welcome. I've been involved, and I did stuff with Ed over the years, but I always felt welcome. And I think that's also something that our museum has going for it.
Well, exactly. Kristen just put the note in the chat box that I experienced the exact same things. I didn't come to the museum until I was 40 years old, and I was immediately welcomed. And if you have a talent or you have a skill, there are enough people there that recognize those talents and skills, and they'll give you the opportunities to grow and learn and run with it. And it's because of everyone there. It's not one or two people. It's something that our I hate to call them ancestors, but our founders impressed on people early on, and it's continued on, and I think it's incredibly important.
And that's a great way to wrap. So Kristen, do you want to take the screen back and open up the floor to discussion?
Yes, in fact, I would like to invite our executive director, Scott Becker, to give us an update on book sales and how you can get the book. Scott?
Thank you very much, Kristen. First of all, I'd just like to thank the panelists today. They it's really a tour de force. This book is just wonderful. The photos jump out off the page at you. It's very readable. You don't have to be a trolley fan to appreciate this book. And not only did our panelists put a lot of time, sweat into the book to make it what it is, but they also opened their checkbooks and all donated towards the publishing of this book. And they actually encouraged others to jump in. And that's why the book was able to be published. So the book is easily the most popular book the museum has ever printed. It's only been on sale for a little over 3 months, and we had 1,000 printed at that time. And we've sold over 550 copies since then, both to individuals and also wholesale to a number of bookstores, museums, and others. So it's extremely popular. And I've already started discussions with the publisher about doing a second printing because I don't think the inventory is going to last, maybe not even into the fall. So if you want your copy, you should get one now because they are flying off the shelves. Just a little over a week ago, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette did a review of the book. And in 3 days, we had sold 75 copies through our website in just 3 days. I was carrying huge piles of books to the post office every day. So it's extremely popular. It's definitely resonating with a lot of people. So thank you again for your good work. And it's very exciting to see this book take off. And I think it really reflects well on the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum.
The question came up in the chat room about the printer. And Bruce identified the company that we use. We've used them for our calendars and publications since 1991. They're no stranger to us, and they treat us well.
They're excellent to work with. Their biggest challenge right now is sourcing the paper. But we do plan to do a second printing, and it's quite exciting.
And they are located in Manchester. It's not like we're dealing with someone from who knows where. We can go. I know I've been down there several times to visit, and Ed's been there to go down and prove things. And it's a local business.
Question in the chat: how much is a copy?
$29.95 plus shipping, and if you're a PA resident, sales tax. And the website's very easy to navigate. And you can also look at our other books. We have the Allegheny Valley Trolleys book, which is excellent as well. And we have some other books. And as Ed mentioned earlier, we're working on the 2023 Western Pennsylvania Trolley calendar right now.
And if you are coming to the West Penn Trolley Meet, we will definitely have the book on sale. In fact, I think we'll have a table there where you can, discuss with some folks on this panel.
Yes, I'll be there both Friday and Saturday at the table, helping out. Scott, what's the member discount?
It's if you're an associate member, it's 5%. If you're a regular member or family supporting what have you, it's 10%. Also, we have a feature on the website. If you donate $50 or more, you get free shipping, and you would be surprised how many people have done that, people that aren't even members of the museum.
David wants to know if we really don't want to get into the process because of autographing things, because we can't all be there. Distance is a problem. And so I think it's just kind of better to leave it as it is. Leave it as it is. And if you want, just come and visit. That's plenty.
Well, Father Jack already blessed all the copies.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah, and a non-autographed copy kind of highlights the team you know, once
Exactly.
you start autographing things, it's like, you know, it kind of
Right.
loses the team aspect.
Yeah, we could put a paw print on it or something like that. It'd be 5 feet, you know.
All right. Well, I will let everybody unmute themselves in just a minute here, but I did want to let everybody know again, West Penn Trolley Meet this weekend coincides with anything on wheels. We're going to have all sorts of interesting vehicles here and classic vehicles. I just got an email about a 1929 Model A coming, which is very exciting, and a micro car. So there's going to be all sorts of interesting things at the museum this weekend. So stop on by, and June 28th, we'll resume our Trolleyology programs with a program on Dayton interurban history from Tom Morrow. And if you haven't got the idea already, you can donate to the museum at patrolley.org/support, which is in the chat box if you'd like to click directly on it. And with that, let me make it so folks can unmute themselves. I think we had a couple comments. The photos really do a lot of storytelling, George. I know one from Arthur in the chat during the program. He said the photo of the auto accident has a 1941 Buick hit by another car. The photo really hurt because he learned to drive, and his first car was a 1941 Buick. So it really tells you like the storytelling that these photos can do.
Someone asked about the color red. Why in the world, this is going out to the audience, why in the world do you think we chose red and the shade of red that was chosen? Kristen, why don't you unmute everyone and let's hear what some people have to say.
Anyone? I think everyone can unmute themselves.
Color of the PCC.
Bravo.
Very
Ding,
Bravo.
ding, 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 ding.
Do I win a book?
Good question. That's-
Tom's a cheapskate.
we might have a copy of the Parkinson book.
I don't know. Are they easy to get anymore?
Probably
saw-
not.
Somebody was holding one up earlier during the when you guys were talking about it. I saw someone hold one up.
Well, I think the one in the presentation, I scanned it and sent it to George, and I'm assuming that was mine.
But the one that I used the one from the book collection. But thank you for sending that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I have all kinds of things here, from the old days.
right, and you notice it has that copy has a little bit of wear and tear on it. Sometimes you end up buying another copy.
Well, I use the stamp tool to make the color uniform again.
All right. Do we have any questions from our audience? I want to thank the presenters as well. That was awesome. This is different than our usual Trolleyology program, and I really enjoyed it. You guys will have to hurry up with part 2 so we can do this again.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to do West. We have to finish West Penn first.
Oh, right. Oh, Scott, what was that?
Yeah, we should also mention that we did a companion exhibit from the book,
Yes.
which has been very popular with our visitors. So then what happened was our staff actually did some interactives with the exhibit. So it's pretty neat.
Someone put a post up about any kind of digital work. I make sure to always let the photography issues, anything like that, to Ed or to Bruce or to John Polak in Thailand. I'm colorblind, so I avoid that. But the vast majority of those images probably had some sort of work done to them at some point along the line after they were scanned. You have to sharpen them up some.
Yeah. Kodachrome picked up a lot of red.
Yeah.
You see with your eyes, but it doesn't process. But when you look at the film, it's in there, and you have to get rid of it.
And some of the images, one of the images, Chris and I tried to get it to work, and so we just make it black and white because we really wanted to use the picture, but we couldn't fix the color to come even close. Things were just too orange and just.
Yeah, and what happened, I think that Ed's point earlier is that the early Ektachrome, and I think a lot of the early films, they were unstable. So some of the dyes faded, and that's why you ended up with only some of the colors and not all the colors. And that one shot I think you're talking about, Dennis, is that the two cars passing at West End Circle.
Right.
And,
That was a Schumann Ektachrome originally, and I made it a black and white.
yeah, I think that was the best choice because
Kodachrome remarkably has held up very well. I have photos here that my father took in 1938, and they look just fine. I have
Well,
Ektachrome that he took in 1956 that is all red.
yeah. Well, and if you're a photography nerd, you also know that the process is fundamentally different for Kodachrome versus Ektachrome.
Yeah, Kodachrome is basically a black and white film that's been dyed.
Right. And yeah. If you've ever had fun processing Ektachrome, E6 or E4, that's another story. All right. What other questions we got out there?
We had a question in the chat from Paul. As the book was being developed, was there any consideration of a then and now style book, like, you know, broad appeal at Barnes and Noble, or was it a conscious decision to stick with just the historical photos?
Oh, I think it was a conscious decision to stick with the historical.
Go ahead.
Many years ago, I did a then and now exhibit at the museum,
Yeah.
and it was well received.
I have contemplated, and I talked with Ed quite a few years ago, of doing an entire series of reviewing the calendar, using the calendar images, and on one page have the calendar image, on another page have the now image. And being able to do something like that wouldn't be that hard to do. It takes time to lay it out. The biggest issue you run into is just the layout of how do you. The advantage we had with the book, we could use a lot of photographs we could never use in the calendar because we can't really use vertical images very well in the calendar. And so being able to lay out a book that's basically all portrait things that aren't some kind of. So the thought is there. It's just the question of who wants
Will
to
we
help?
live long enough to do it?
Who wants
Well,
to
and,
help? Who wants to ride around Western Pennsylvania with me and take now photographs?
Well, and as Sarah pointed out in the chat, the now versions of then and nows are quickly dated because it's only now for, you know, when you take
Yeah.
the photo. So
Not too long.
yeah.
It works well if you have then and later on then. We did that with the calendar a couple of years ago, where we had the line car and then at Castle Shannon or somewhere, and then we had the line car in an inset that was a
looks like
more
now.
modern picture, but not now.
Now, yeah.
And
That
then
works.
another question, more I think probably for Bruce, was there any thought of including modern landmarks like freeways on the updated maps?
I was, you saw in what I showed you that, we had McKnight Road on there and we had the Perry Highway on there. And I was trying to make the map more relevant to people who weren't around back then, that don't really know where those places are in relationship to where the places of today. So I think that would be a good thing to have and do. It takes time.
The tough part too with that is because Bruce did a lot of that when he did and the maps he did for Armstrong County and for Allegheny Valley, but you start running, especially when you look at the Pittsburgh's entire map, where do you start putting all of this stuff? Because it just gets so crowded.
Yeah, and then it becomes unreadable.
Right.
Yeah.
If you can do it, at the
Well, the
Huntington Gardens. So yeah, to the point of overlay, one way to handle that is in a physical way. So at the Huntington Gardens in the visitor center there, they have a big map of the Pacific Electric system, but they literally have, and it's huge, but it has about 6 overlays that you can visitors can peel back and put back down. But yeah, it's tough because it's always that how much is too much to even digest.
Well, with Pittsburgh having the rivers, that at least helps a little bit of, you can get a general idea of where you are without a lot of other landmarks.
Yeah.
And
I think just my sense of looking at the map, pulling it out of the book and looking at it, it was, there's stuff that was taken off of what I did. I mean, it was less, there were less things on it than I remember. I haven't done a side-by-side comparison, but I think the map of the book
part
is
of the
less.
whole process, like it's part of the whole bigger process of how do you get there? But yeah, I think part of it too is, the book had a certain amount of content, and but yeah, I think to the point of digital map making and layers, it's modular too. So you can actually make different versions of it by turning on and turning off layers.
Do we have any questions from the folks on Zoom here? Feel free to unmute yourselves if you like.
Yeah, I'll just say as an anecdote, I didn't realize that the museum had the dispatcher's map until Scott Becker and I were talking about the book, and about an hour later, I'm now in charge of cleaning the map for display in the Welcome to Education Center.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
Yeah, one of the things that
What do they want?
One of the things that I think got confused was that when the article was done for the newspaper, they talked about the map, and they were talking about the map from the dispatcher's room that's going to be on the wall at the museum. So, it wasn't the map that was in the book.
Right.
Was the idea with the organization of the book that it be chronologic or more by region and location?
That was some of the struggles we went through, and I think some of where that entered into it. I think to Chris's earlier comments, and I think even the Parkinson book by having routes in it. We had a lot of that material, and but again, it was kind of like almost, it was too much. It was just too much at that point.
I would add to that, George, that the chronology is a very difficult thing to establish. Many of these companies were an outgrowth of the horse car companies. The horse car companies' finances were rolled into the cable car companies' finances, and that was rolled into the original Pittsburgh Railways, and that caused no end of problems.
Yes.
But many records from the 1800s simply don't exist in any place that any of us know about. So we cannot say with any certainty when these lines opened, what the original equipment was, who made the equipment, what the car numbers were. A lot of that material would be really nice to have, but it's a lot easier to do it geographically.
I think what we ended up settling on with all the things we talked about earlier was, why don't we tell a story for a change, And that's what we decided to do, is ultimately just tell the story.
Sure, the roots are there. The roots are there. You can look at the map, and you look at the photographs and see what the neighborhoods were like.
Yeah, so that was and that was something Chris and I talked about. And I think to your point earlier, you kind of have to leave your ego at the door. It's like, who had the better idea? And honestly, I'll credit Chris for saying, let's just do photographs of the 4 districts. And ultimately, as I look at it, I really like that decision. I think it was the best decision.
In my years in the archives, the most common question from the public was, do you have a picture of the car line that ran past my neighborhood?
Probably yes.
Getting a question in the chat. How are we selling the book? Like, what channels are we using for the sales?
We can learn to be more aggressive in our outreach to selling books.
So we've got some online, aside from our own online store. We have some vendors selling it. Who else do we have in the Pittsburgh area?
The Heinz History Center. We have a bookstore up in Lawrenceville that's selling them. The Boston Street Railway is selling them. They've done multiple orders. Quite a few vendors are selling it.
I saw at
There was
least,
a huge local interest section up at Grove City. At the outlets.
I think Ron's Books is carrying it.
Yeah, they've reordered it 4 times.
Okay.
And I'm also working on getting a copy into the Carnegie Library, so it'll be available there.
Yeah,
Wouldn't hurt to
that's
make a
great.
YouTube video summarizing the book, having some pages of it shown with order information at the end. Post it on YouTube.
We'll definitely have this on YouTube, although I don't know how many people will want to sit through the whole thing. Although, believe it or not, we have thousands of people who do sit through the whole thing.
Yeah.
Through
No,
these
focus-
Trolleyology programs.
Focus 45 seconds. That's about all you get anybody's attention. 45
Yeah.
seconds with all the right keywords in the title.
Description,
It'll
yep.
catch people that you would want to catch with the keywords, and just get in, tell your story, get out, and give them the order information.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do that.
And there's this little thing called Amazon that sells books too.
We've definitely had it go out in several of our newsletters, and we have also put it on social media. So, yeah. Other questions? Oh, there's some stuff coming in the chat. Oh, yes. Let's see. Any issues with photo copyrights?
Ed?
No, no, we own the copyright to Ed Miller's material. Truman left no heirs. We have permission from Russ. We were willed to Mary's material. We're pretty thorough in researching this.
This is Jim Graebner, Ed. And we've run into some problems with the Danville book on potential copyrights. Apparently, some of the newer firms that have bought up the copyrights to Street Railway Journal, and some of those have gotten very persnickety about copyrights. So you're in good shape owning those collections.
Yeah.
But we had some problems with the Jewett book on the company. The publisher was very insistent on going back and forth with a number of letters, and we finally agreed that we would simply say original photographer unknown, collection of.
Right. And that's
that-
legitimate,
It is? Okay.
as far as I
That's-
know.
That seemed to be a real good way of doing it. Because I was always arguing that I could have been standing next to them in a photo line,
Yeah,
and how in the world would they ever figure out who
they wouldn't know. What seems to be the problem with Street Railway or Electric Railway Journal? I thought that was McGraw-Hill.
Yeah, but somebody has stated that, and I haven't verified this myself, but somebody has said that they now own copyrights because they're reprinting it, I guess, or planning on reprinting it or thinking about it.
Well,
But,
if it's 1922 or earlier,
23.
it's in the public domain.
It should be.
Anything 70 years.
It's 70 now? Okay.
Yeah.
I
Some
think it's-
local historical societies get a little touchy about use of things. We've usually at East Penn been able to calm them with a complimentary copy of something.
Right.
That would be easy to do.
Well, and we do that. We make sure every year when we do the calendar, a complimentary copy of the calendar goes to every photo contributor. It's
We
just
do
another
that
way-
too.
Another way of saying thank you for sharing your talents with us.
Or if they're no longer living, to any known survivors.
Good way of handling it.
All right. Any other questions for our team here?
Yes, I want to congratulate the team. Just as you were talking about it, this is Bob Newhauser, ERA. My copy of the book just arrived, like right now. And It's really spectacular. I had posted a question earlier. Since Pat seems to have a heads up executive director, they must be aware of the book. Do they have have they had a position? Are they supportive? Do they have a transit store? Is that another outlet, or are they not interested?
The key management at Port Authority all received complimentary copies, and they're very happy with the book. They do not have a store.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you too. Glad you enjoy it.
Great job, guys.
Thank you from everybody.
All right. Any other excuse me? Any other questions for our team tonight? Lots of nice comments coming in. Any other questions about the book or how it came together? All right. Hearing none, I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. And I hope to see you guys at a future Trolleyology. Thank you again to our group, Ed, George, Bruce, Chris, and Dennis. This was a real pleasure. And thanks to Scott for his updates about the book as well. And thank you to all of you who joined us tonight, especially those of you who donated, and for those of you who purchased the book or will be purchasing the book soon. I hope to see some of you guys at the West Penn Trolley Meet or at a future Trolleyology. Reach out to me if you have any questions. You can find my email address in your confirmation email from tonight. Thank you again. Hope to see you all soon. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.